Remember last time we said that he likes all his little words? Yeah, he calls the interpreter the terp. That is so annoying. So then I talked to the terp. You know, that's short for interpreter. If you don't know. You might not know, because you're not a soldier like me, who has to work with the terp on the reg. Good morning, how are you? Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of I'll Spare You the Details, in which we go painfully through Prince Harry's spare. Chapter by painful chapter, we've plodded along together. And last time we were together, we talked all about how he had gone to Afghanistan. He was in Afghanistan the entire last episode. He revealed a lot of weird things. He said a lot of strange things that didn't really make any sense. He talked about how just wild he thought that it was that he had to complete his will. That really just offended him. He was really shaken by the morbidity of that request. And then we talked about how he made a strange reference to the Taliban's initiation ceremony, in which the Taliban would have to, like, a new recruit would be given a gun and sent to try to cross the battle lines, and if he made it, he, was an official member of the Taliban, and if he didn't, then they left his body on the fields to be eaten by dogs. And Harry says that this was their quote-unquote blooding. And of course, then he ties it back to his own blooding when Sandy had shoved his face into the deer, also when Tiggy had smeared the rabbit blood on his face. And he says this weird line: were Sandy and Tiggy working for the Taliban? It's like, it's so incongruent. It makes no sense at all. What are you talking about? It's lines like that where I'm just like, where was the editor? Because there's no significance to that statement. Like, okay, so he had his own initiation, and these young insurgent members are also involved in a initiation of sorts. It's like, okay, but why are you drawing this weird analogy to the people in your life and the Taliban? Like, that's not a meaningful analogy. That's what bugged me. It's not a meaningful analogy. Oh, wow, you realize that there's an initiation there, and you also had an initiation of sorts. But that's not worth a mention. And in the way he did it was just so clunky. I was like, ghostwriter, what were you doing? And editor, wake up. Anyway, so that was weird. He also talked about the fact that he's right in the middle of trying to call in air power, and then he looks down and sees a pen on the desk. And then he's like immediately placed back in the moment in which he was opening the present from Mad Margot when she gave him the biro pen. And, he's completely distracted because of it. Again, really? That was worthy of your memoir? Your coming out to the world as the man that you have become was to remind us once again about the joke gift. And another thing he talked about, and I think this is worth a mention, he was talking about the Gurkhas and how they worked for them, and that they are these legendary soldiers from Nepal who've always worked with the British soldiers. He talks about them like they're kind of like his groupies, like they just follow him around, and like they're really taken with his royalty. It's like kind of annoying, but kind of also a compliment, so thanks. But that's not why they were there. They were there specifically on mission to defend him and to keep him safe. And he never mentions that. He's never like, these men were around me because they had been given the dangerous task of protecting the Prince of England while he plays war. I mean, at one point he's talking about how he is in this, like, I don't know, fort on top of this mountain, and the Taliban have been fighting to get this fort, and they've been fighting to defend it these many years, and him and there's he says that there happens to be 5 Gurkhas with him. Yeah, happens. Those are your armed bodyguards that you were so upset about having to leave behind before. There's just so much shade and falsehood in this book. There's just so much that's not said and like conveniently left out. I'm over it. Okay, so that's where we left off. When he had been at one place, this base called Dwyer, and then he wanted to see some more fighting, and so they took him to another place. I think that place was called Delhi. And that's where he was when we left off. He had just been frustrated by the fact that he had tried to lead a mission, and he had tried to give his opinion about how it should be done, and the Americans didn't listen. Rightly so, since it was the Americans leading the mission and he was just backup, but whatever. And he felt like he should have been listened to. They didn't listen to him. So he was upset about that. It didn't go as well as he imagined that it could have gone. It ruined the building when they dropped a 500-pound bomb on it twice, and it didn't obliterate everything like it would have had they followed his careful tutelage. And that's where we left off. He is still there, still in Afghanistan, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm just going to skim a lot of this because it's boring. It's boring. He doesn't say anything that's interesting. He tells us, I mean, he does say some things that are sort of interesting, but it just feels like so much falsehood on so much falsehood. I just can't give it the time of day. But one thing that is interesting is how much he talks about how the press was following him constantly while he was in Afghanistan, and they had been given permission to work with him, but they had to promise that they would not release any of the footage. They had to just sit on it until he was out of there. And they were complying. But he just acts like, it's like, how dangerous could things have been if they let the press corps travel with you? So he wants to be all, playing soldier and, got that 50 caliber weapon and he's just over there, shooting the gun. Then it's also dangerous and he's just alone in the world. Just one of the guys just trying to defend freedom. Meanwhile, he's babysitting the press. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Blah, blah, blah. I can't even get into it. Remember last time we said that he likes all his little words? Yeah, he calls the interpreter the terp. That is so annoying. So then I talked to the terp. That's short for interpreter. If you don't know. You might not know. Because you're not a soldier like me. Who has to work with the terp on the reg. Okay, so then he talks about how one day he's babysitting the press and they keep bugging him because they want to get out of the vehicle. They want to look around. They want to take some pictures. He's being like, no, guys, no. Okay, just stay in the car. It's not safe out there yet. And they just would not let up. So he's like, fine, guys, you can get out for a little bit, but be careful about the landmines. There's a lot of them around here. So they get out. It's like, okay, if they're not supposed to get out, if it's your job, if you're just like, your job to keep them safe, then don't let them out. Doesn't matter what they say. Just be like, no, sorry, we don't get out. There's a window. Take a picture. Get a backbone. He just finished telling us about the story where no one would listen to him and he gave in and look how things went. Okay, well, here's another instance where you can use that newfound backbone that you claim that you now had. Don't let the journalists out of the car if it's so dangerous. Just say no. He doesn't know what no means. So they get out and immediately they begin to be fired upon. Bullets are whizzing past their head. Explosions are going off. And he says, I looked around. Everyone was on their stomachs except me and two others. So, I guess that's an easy test to find out who's got some brains in the bunch. Gideon made people go lay down by a creek and see who drank laying on their stomachs and who cupped the water. Well, we have a new way of testing who should be around and who shouldn't be a soldier. And it's called fire a gun over someone's head and see if they hit the ground or not. Okay. He tells a lot of sad stories that I don't want to get into. They're just depressing. And then he talks about the time when he found out through listening over the radio that people were coming after him. They were coming after him. And they called him Red Fox. Red Fox. So he's listening about this person. They keep calling this person Red Fox. Is Red Fox in trouble? Had Red Fox done anything? Who's Red Fox? He asks himself. Suddenly, in a blinding flash of inspiration, he realizes that he is the Red Fox and that he's about to be murdered. And he's just sitting there drinking hot chocolate, blinking at the radio. What? And they say that he better get out of there. And so he sits there and curses to himself for a while. That's what you do when someone wants to come and kill you. That'll stop the murderer. And he says, my mind flashed back to Eton. The fox I'd glimpsed when stoned from the window of the loo. So he really had been a messenger from the future. After all, One day you'll be alone late at night in the darkness, hunted like me. See how you like it. Did the fox need to show up to ask you how you'd feel about being hunted in the darkness? Interesting. Then he says that in the subterfuge of night, he was pulled from the ranks by none other than Colonel Ed, the man who'd gotten him into it in the first place. And as it had happened, an Australian magazine had picked up the fact that he was in Afghanistan. But the magazine was of no consequence, so nobody paid any attention. Then some dimwit American decided to flash it all over their website. Now everybody knew about it. Dumb Yanks. And so he says that when Colonel Ed comes to him and says, we've got to pull you, he's like, I was on the verge of begging to stay, but I could see there was no chance. On the verge of begging to stay, please. I bet he couldn't wait to pack his bags. So then he jumps on that Chinook that's still turning and burning. Another one of his dumb phrases. While he's on the flight back, he happens to be in the plane, and I guess they let him ride like an animal with the rest of them in the C-17. A lot of people who were on the flight were wounded and going back home. Now, there's a lot of jubilation about finally getting out of that hellscape. And he makes his way to some of the more grievously wounded soldiers who were like really, they were like on stretchers, horribly, horribly wounded. And he says in this wonderful line, the best line of the book so far, he says, I felt angry with myself for having been so self-absorbed. Oh, Harry, could you be becoming a man? Is this it? Is this your blooding? When you finally saw that somebody else was hurting and you decided to care about them more than yourself? But the beauty of the moment is short-lived. Because following that, he says, I spent the rest of that flight thinking about the many young men and women going home in similar shape and all the ones not going home at all. And I thought about the people at home who didn't know the first thing about this war. By choice. Many opposed it, but few knew a damn thing about it. I wondered why. Whose job was it to tell them? Oh yeah, I thought. The press. So, right back to this simmering pot of self-absorption. The press ruins everything, and even this, they're wrecking it for everybody else. Everybody should know what's going on at the war, but we don't because the press doesn't know what they're doing. Now, I will join him in the sentiment that the press doesn't really know what they're doing, but then do something about it. If you think that the press is so awful, why don't you use your resources to start some sort of alternative media? There's an idea. But no, it's just so much easier to complain and cry. Why do something about it when you can just weep tears into your pillow night after night? Then he comes home, and of course we have the obligatory passage about his difficult entry back into civilian life. Look, here's the thing. I would not be this glib about a soldier who had really experienced some hardship. And I'm not saying Harry didn't see some things. He does tell a pretty sad story about a little boy who was wheeled up to him in a wheelbarrow who was missing his legs. We sort of skimmed that. But I'm not saying he didn't see some things. I'm sure that he did. And I'm sure his entry into it was difficult. But so much of what he experienced in Afghanistan is to be questioned that you just wonder how wounded he truly was. There's all the time people trying to hold him back. In fact, I take that back. He didn't actually see the boy in the wheelbarrow without the legs. Somebody blocked his view so he couldn't see it. Now, he knew it had happened, but somebody was like, you don't want to see this. You'll never be able to get it out of your head. So I just don't know how much he really experienced. Anyway, once he finally gets home, he sees Pa, he sees William. They give him what amounts to the most affection he's ever had in his life, a squeeze on the shoulder. And then he decides, oh yeah, I have a girlfriend. Probably should check up on what's going on with her. So a couple days into being home, he decides that he's going to ring Chels up. He didn't call her first thing. He calls her a couple days in. Now, I would be offended, but whatever. I would want to be the first call. If I'm 100% honest, I would want the first call. After he saw his parents, okay, fine. But you're going to wait 2 days to call me? I guess I really am not high on your priority list. He runs off to Botswana, meets up with the gang, that being Tej, Mike, Addie, and Chels, when he can remember. He says that they had a decent time. They, drank, of course. What else are they going to do? Not enjoy Africa, but where's the alcohol? Then he says one night everyone's gone to bed, and he's sitting with Tej, his surrogate mom, never mom. He's sitting with mom, and, Tej says to him, how was it in Afghanistan? Okay. Well, he is really appreciative of her interest in it, because to this point, no one's even asked. But people don't ask you how it was in case you don't want to talk about it. Like, if you want to talk about it, you'll bring it up. I remember my grandmother telling me, who had several brothers who fought in World War II, that you never ask a soldier about his experiences. That to ask him what he experienced is the greatest breach of his privacy. Because if he wants you to know, he'll tell you. And to ask him is to put him in the most vulnerable position he could be in. Because you don't know what's living behind his eyes. What's going on in his mind, you don't know. Now, being an open person so that they could talk to you is one thing, but to probe and to ask and to potentially broach subject matter that you don't need to be insensitive about, but you don't even know how to ask about it, you just don't do it. It's just not done. And anyway, so in that vein, people were just not asking him to be respectful for what he had seen and experienced. Well, no one asked. Willie didn't ask. Pond didn't ask. Chels didn't ask. She might have if you called her the first day you came back, but he says Tej asked, and so they have this lovely little mom-son conversation. And and that sets them off to talking about other things also. She wants to know what's going on with he and Chelsea. Good question, we all want to know. And he responds in this way. He says, she likes me, I said. Loves me, I guess. You guess. But she doesn't like the baggage that comes with me. Doesn't like everything that comes with being royal, the press and so forth. And none of that's ever gone away. So what hope is there? And Tisha's like, okay, but could you see yourself marrying her? I mean, like, pretend all that's not a thing. Could you see yourself marrying her? And this is his response. And you guys, okay, I'm not against his reasoning for why he says that it's not probably a marriage material situation, but I really don't like the way he couches it. Like, he's trying to let himself off the hook here, and it's like, oh, stop blaming this on everybody else. Listen to this. He says, so Tisha's like, so could you marry her? Do you see it? Mm-hmm. And he goes, I tried to explain. I cherished Chel's carefree and authentic spirit. She never worried about what other people thought. She wore short skirts and high boots and danced with abandon and drank as much tequila as I did, and I cherished all those things about her. But I couldn't help worrying about how Granny might feel about them, or the British public. And the last thing I wanted was for Chels to change to accommodate them. Oh, stop it. Do you want the mother of your children dancing in short skirts, guzzling tequila at all hours of the night? Stop blaming it on Granny. You don't want to marry her because she's a lot of fun, but she's not the person that you want to have your kids with, okay? Don't waste the girl's time. Like, if you know you're just going to break her heart later, maybe don't waste your time. But my whole point is this. Okay, so if you want to party around with this girl, okay, fine. But don't couch it in this language like, I mean, I really like her, but what would Granny think? What do you think? What do you want? You don't want Chels as a wife. But don't blame Granny for that. Come on. He goes on to say he really wanted to be a husband and a wife, he really wanted to be a husband and a father. But it takes a certain kind of person to withstand the scrutiny that he was under, and he just didn't think Chelsea could handle it, so guess that's not gonna work out. So the next chapter is him talking about their breakup, or just sort of like how it fizzled out. She was just really not into being tracked all the time by the press. Like, that was not a feather in her cap. And they tracked her all the time when she was at school in England, and then when she went back to Cape Town, the press was always showing up, and they discovered that there was a tracking device on the bottom side of her car. Marco helped her to figure that one out. And apparently this had happened to quite a few people in Harry's life. So Charles is just like, look, here's the thing. You're a nice guy. But this parade, this circus that follows you, I mean, I'm not looking for a job in the circus, so I'm going to go my separate ways. So she leaves. Then he meets another girl called Flack. well, she's funny, she's sweet, she's cool. He met her at a restaurant with his mates. Apparently she was a TV presenter, but he didn't know about that because he didn't watch any TV. And he says that she wasn't taken aback that I didn't recognize her, which I liked. You know, she didn't have a big ego. Well, thank God for that, because there's not enough room for all the ego that'll be in this relationship with yours. Her real name is Caroline Flack. But again, it fizzles out because who's she doing it again? The damn press. The press has come back to haunt him and ruin things for him. So Chelsea is gone, and now Flack is gone, and they're just wrecking everything. It's always the press, but I'm like, could it have been you? I feel like if I met a guy who was just the most incredible man I'd ever met, if I was one of these girls, and I met this prince, and he was just like incredibly strong and masculine and kind and all the things that a girl would ever want, I think I could put up with the press. I mean, I really don't feel like that would be a deal breaker for me. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. I've never been hounded, but it just doesn't seem like that is such an easy out for a girl to be like, I really like you, but like the press following you is like totally unacceptable. Like, I can't have that in my life. Like, I love you and you're awesome, but the press is a deal breaker for me. No, I don't think many girls would actually say that. If the guy was like a winner, like a 10-10-10, you know, come on. Okay, so now he's like, I need work. I'm going to have some sort of work. I can't just sit around all the time drinking and trying to find a girl who won't use the press as an excuse. So he goes and has this dinner with JLP, invites him to a dinner with some bigwigs, and he says to the bigwig general, I need some kind of work. And like, we can't send you back. You were just there for like a hot second, and look how quick that fizzled out. Like, you might need to find a new goal in life. And he's like, yeah, but I want to. And then he's told, all right, well, maybe you could pilot helicopters. And he's like, no, I don't want to pilot helicopters. Everybody already did that. I want my own thing. I can't do that. I'm not a copycat. He's the very definition of one. And finally they're like, yeah, well, there's no other work for you. Okay. You have to be somewhere where you could get away quickly and they can't find you. So make your peace with it. And then they tell him it's going to be 2 years. 2 years? Oh, bloody hell. At every turn of the way, life was determined to drag me back into the classroom. Bloody hell. Well, sorry that you can't just plop yourself into a helicopter and cruise the skies without any book learning. So after he gets done whining, complaining about that, he starts talking about his humanitarian work with the soldiers. So he felt like nobody was noticing that there was a lot of wounded soldiers coming home. I noticed, but okay. And he says that it was up to him to wake the public up to realize that there actually was some dire consequences that come with war. He wanted everyone to realize that there was a war. They didn't seem to get that either. And he was going to be their window into the truth. So anyway, he does a lot of work with the wounded veterans. Okay, you know what? Okay, I'll cut the sass for a second. Good for him. That is a worthy cause. A very, very, very worthy cause. And if there is anything that he could have spent his time on, bravo. So he talks a lot about that. Then he talks about how he went into Africa and Tej and Mike let him help unpaid on this documentary they were making, and how one time he had to run after a bull elephant and he was so into it that he ran 8 kilometers without shoes on. Okay. Then he starts talking about how he really ran amok when some footage was released that he had filmed of him introducing a bunch of his mates. And it was when he was in Afghanistan, and he's talking about each one of them, and then he uses a slur unintentionally. Now, I saw Bend It Like Beckham. I know not to say these things.
I saw it. She fouled you. She tugged your shirt. You just overreacted, that's all.
It's not all. She called me a packy, but I guess you wouldn't understand what that feels like, would you?
Jess, I'm Irish. Of course I'd understand what that feels like.
But he says he didn't know that this word was a slur. He goes, many people use the word and I never knew, and I never saw anyone flinch or cringe, and I never suspected them of being racist. Then he has to throw this in. Neither did I know anything about unconscious bias. I didn't know about that. I didn't know I could hate people and not know it. I was 21, awash in isolation and privilege. And if I thought anything about this word at all, I thought it was like Aussie, harmless. I genuinely can see where he made this mistake. Okay, don't come after me, but I actually can see how this happened. Here's the thing though, like I've never understood how a racist slur could be offensive because it's literally sounds coming out of somebody's mouth and then you're choosing to be offended by them. I'm not going to use a racial slur, but I just don't understand why people give so much weight and power to those words because somebody could call me, being half Puerto Rican, if somebody wanted to call me some like little slur or whatever, okay, that's your problem. It's your problem you want to talk to me like that. It's not my problem. I am none of the things that that word entails. So this speaks more to you than to me. I don't know what to say to you. Anyway, he uses a word he didn't know it was bad, but the whole world is outraged with him and will have nothing to do with him. And they think that they are now seeing the color of his racist ways. He says he called up the friend who he had called this slur to. And the friend was like, not a big deal. I don't think you're racist. But then he's shamed by the guy's easy grace and feels like that's a slight also. And that is where we're going to leave off. There wasn't a lot of juicy gems there, just a lot of the same. I had high hopes for him when he said that he was coming to a new understanding that he was completely self-obsessed, but that was short-lived, my friends. It was short-lived. Next time we come together, we'll find out what happens when he decides that he's going to finally fly some helicopters, despite the fact that that made him a copycat. When he finally begins to gather and rally his strength and decides to plow on, even though Willie already did it, even though Pa already did it, we'll find out how he manages to continue. See you on... You know what? I was thinking, by the way, I've always done Thursdays as our next video, but I think that I might start doing Fridays as our video because this, you know, I watch what is convenient for you guys, and Friday seems to be a much more convenient day to enjoy this. Like Thursday's like in the middle of the week. You can't enjoy gossip in the middle of the week. Friday. So I might be changing that. So I'll let you know if I decide to do this on Friday, but for right now, expect Friday. I think we're going to start doing it as Friday. So Sunday, Tuesday, Friday. I don't even know what these days are. This is like randomness that I just chose, but we'll just see what works and we'll go from there. All right. Bye-bye. See you next time.